y'all, welcome back to my channel. If you haven't been here before, my name is Julie and I mostly make content surrounding music, makeup, as well as mental health. Today's video is part of my new series entitled Let's Get Clinical, and today we are talking about a mood disorder, that being bipolar disorder. So I have my handy dandy DSM-5 here. I'm going to go through the symptoms, the different types of bipolar disorder, prevalence, and treatment options. Starting off with bipolar 1. For bipolar 1, you need to meet specific criteria for a clinician to consider that you have had a manic episode. Because some people with bipolar disorder more so have depressive episodes, or they experience hypomania and not mania. Not that it's any less valid, it just looks somewhat different. A manic episode in the DSM-5 is defined as a distinct period of abnormally and persistently elevated, expansive or irritable mood, abnormally and persistently increased goal-directed activity or energy, lasting at least 1 week and present most of the day, nearly every day, or any duration if hospitalization is necessary. So this is important to mention because if you've been hospitalized for a manic episode, they most likely will classify it as manic as opposed to hypomanic. It doesn't mean that it's that way 100% of the time, but it is important that they mentioned it there. So as they said, you need to experience this period of mania for a week for you to qualify for a bipolar 1 disorder diagnosis. The second criteria says, during the period of mood disturbance and increased energy or activity, 3 or more of the following symptoms are present to a significant degree and represent a noticeable change from usual behavior. 1. Inflated self-esteem or grandiosity. 2. Decreased need for sleep, such as feeling rested after only 3 hours of sleep. 3. More talkative than usual or pressure to keep talking. 4. Flight of ideas or subjective experience that thoughts are racing. 5. Distractibility, such as attention is too easily drawn to unimportant or irrelevant external stimuli, so external factors, outside influences. 6. Increase in goal-directed activity, such as socially at work or school, or sexually, or psychomotor agitation. 7. Excessive involvement in activities that have a high potential for painful consequences, such as engaging in unrestrained buying sprees, sexual indiscretions, or foolish business investment. Criteria C. The mood disturbance is sufficiently severe to cause marked impairment in social or occupational functioning, or to necessitate hospitalization to prevent harm to self or others, or there can be psychotic features. Next up, the episode cannot be attributable to physiological effects of a substance such as drug abuse, a medication, or other treatment, or to another medical condition. So those factors need to be ruled out in order for you to qualify for this specific diagnosis. You only need to experience 1 manic episode in your lifetime to qualify for this bipolar 1 disorder diagnosis. Moving forward into defining a hypomanic episode. Criterion A, a distinct period of abnormally and persistently elevated, expansive or irritable mood, and abnormally and persistently increased activity or energy, lasting at least 4 consecutive days and present most of the day, nearly every day. Next. During the period of mood disturbance and increased energy and activity, 3 or more of the following symptoms have persisted, represent a noticeable change from usual behavior, and have been present to a significant degree. All 5 of these are the same exact symptoms that I previously read. All 7 are here. You only need 3 to qualify for this diagnosis. However, they specify if there's only an irritable mood within mania or hypomania, then 4 of these symptoms need to be present, and that is the same for bipolar 1 disorder as well. Moving forward to further criterion for hypomania. This episode is associated with an unequivocal change in functioning that's uncharacteristic of the individual when not symptomatic. So some people may have a hyper or intense personality, and clinicians need to be aware of who someone is as an individual to differentiate, is this an episode or is this them being slightly agitated, maybe fits in better to ADHD or anxiety. They need to make sure that it's this diagnosis before giving it out. Next, the disturbance in mood and the change in functioning are observable by others. Also, the episode's not severe enough to cause marked impairment in social or occupational functioning or to necessitate hospitalization. If there are psychotic features, the episode then becomes by definition manic. So if you experience psychotic features, then your episode is considered a manic episode and not a hypomanic episode. Hypomanic episodes, it mentions, can also occur within bipolar 1 disorder, but again, you need the mania to qualify for that diagnosis. Now we're going to talk talk about major depressive episodes because although major depressive disorder is a separate disorder, depression is a major component of bipolar disorder. So you can experience either mania, hypomania, or major depression and a mix of those within the disorder or specific type of bipolar that you're experiencing. For major depressive episodes, 5 or more of the following symptoms have to be present during a 2-week period and represent a change from previous functioning. One of the symptoms has to either be depressed mood or loss of interest or pleasure, which we know is referred to as anhedonia. 1. Depressed mood most of the day, nearly every day, as indicated by either subjective report, meaning the individual's reporting it, or observation made by others. This can look like irritable mood for children and adolescents, they mention. Next, markedly diminished interest or pleasure in all or almost all activities most of the day, nearly every day, as indicated by either subjective account or observation. Next, significant weight loss when not dieting or weight gain, or decrease or increase in appetite nearly every day. Insomnia or hyposomnia nearly every day, so trouble sleeping for the most part. Psychomotor agitation or retardation nearly every day, which is observable by others and isn't just merely subjective feelings of restlessness or being slowed down. So this is a way more intense experience than just feeling restless, which is something very common for people with depression and anxiety. This is a little bit bigger than that. Fatigue or loss of energy nearly every day. Feelings of worthlessness or excessive or inappropriate guilt, which could be classified as delusional, nearly every day. Diminished ability to think or concentrate or indecisiveness nearly every day. Finally, recurrent thoughts of death, not just a fear of dying, recurrent suicidal ideation without a specific plan or a suicide attempt or a specific plan for committing suicide. On to the next criteria here for major depressive episodes. The symptoms cause clinically significant distress or impairment in social, occupational, or other important areas of functioning. Most mental illnesses require that for the diagnosis, you must experience clinically significant distress or impairment in different areas. So is this negatively impacting your functioning in your life? The episode's not attributable to the physiological effects of a substance or another medical condition, which was another factor to be ruled out in the next one. Moving forward into bipolar 1 disorder. So the criteria have been met for that one manic episode, and the occurrence of the manic in the major depressive episodes is not better explained by schizoaffective disorder, schizophrenia, delusional disorder, or other schizophrenia spectrum or psychotic disorders. So again, you need to rule out other diagnoses to make sure this is the right diagnosis. For prevalence for bipolar 1, the 12-month prevalence estimate in the United States was 0.6% for bipolar 1 in the DSM-4, which is the version of the DSM before this one. 12-month prevalence of bipolar 1 disorder across 11 countries ranged from 0 to 0.6%. The lifetime male to female prevalence ratio is approximately 1.1 to 1. So although there's a smaller percentage of people who struggle with bipolar 1 disorder, we're going to get into other types of bipolar disorders. On to bipolar 2 disorder. You need to meet these following criteria to qualify for this diagnosis. We talked about what a hypomanic episode looks like. We talked about what a major depressive episode looks like. For bipolar 2 disorder, criteria have been met for at least one hypomanic episode and at least one major depressive episode. There has never been a manic episode. The occurrence of the hypomanic episode and major depressive episodes is not better explained by schizoaffective disorder. So they're ruling out the other disorders just like previously. The 12-month prevalence of bipolar 2 disorder internationally is 0.3%. In the US, it's 0.8%. When bipolar 1, bipolar 2, as well as bipolar disorder not otherwise specified, there is a combined prevalence rate of 1.8% of bipolar disorders in the United States, whereas in non-United States community samples, there were higher rates, 2.7% inclusive, in youth age 12 and up. Okay, let's get into the final few types of bipolar disorder. We often hear about bipolar 1 and 2 disorder and manic versus hypomanic, but let's get into the other types because there are other types and it's important for them to be represented. Next up, we have cyclothymic disorder. The diagnostic criteria for this disorder specifically says for at least 2 years, but only one for children and adolescents, there have been numerous periods with hypomanic symptoms that don't meet the criteria for a hypomanic episode, and numerous periods with depressive symptoms that don't meet the criteria for a major depressive episode. So this person still struggles with symptoms and aspects of bipolar disorder, but doesn't meet the criterion for a bipolar 2 disorder diagnosis, because although they're experiencing symptoms, it's not enough symptoms to qualify for that diagnosis. It doesn't mean they're struggling any less, which this is why it makes sense that this diagnosis is here. During the above 2-year period, or one for children and adolescents, the hypomanic and depressive periods have been present for at least half the time, and the individual has not been without the symptoms for more than 2 months at the time. So this truly has to chronically impact your life for you to qualify for this diagnosis. I'm going to get into the diagnostic features listed here about cyclothymic disorder because I feel the description for the diagnosis is a little bit vague, and I want you at home to get a better idea of what this may look like. So they say an essential feature of cyclothymic disorder is a chronic fluctuating mood disturbance that involves these hypomanic and depressive symptoms. The lifetime prevalence of cyclothymic disorder is 0.4 to 1%. Prevalence in mood disorders clinically ranges from 3 to 5%. So mood disorders include unipolar and bipolar disorders. So today I'm focusing on bipolar disorders, whereas unipolar disorders are specific to depressive disorders. So there's no mania or hypomania. There's no indication of bipolar disorder for those disorders. We have other categories of bipolar disorder that are not often listed here, such as other specified bipolar and related disorder. This category has to do with presentations where symptoms of bipolar and related disorders don't meet the full criteria. So presentations that can be specified using the other specified designation include the following: short duration hypomanic episodes, typically 2 to 3 days, as well as major depressive episodes. The episodes of hypomanic symptoms cannot overlap with the major depressive episodes, so the disturbance doesn't meet criteria for major depressive episode with mixed features. Mixed features means that there are features of the depressive episode along with the hypomania simultaneously. Hypomanic episodes with insufficient symptoms and major depressive episodes. Hypomanic episode without prior major depressive episode, as well as short duration cyclothymia, less than 24 months. So even if you haven't struggled with the symptoms of bipolar disorder or specific to cyclothymia where you don't meet the criteria for a manic or hypomanic or full-on depressive episode, at least you're still validated here and may be able to receive the diagnosis of a short duration cyclothymia, which is going to be specified as bipolar NOS or not otherwise specified. We also have unspecified bipolar and related disorder. Now that we've gone over the types of bipolar disorder, primarily bipolar 1, 2, as well as cyclothymia, although you can qualify for not otherwise specified bipolar or unspecified bipolar, which is typically diagnosed in emergency room settings or where the clinician doesn't have enough information on the client or doesn't want to reveal certain information about the client, but feels that they do not qualify for a unipolar depression type diagnosis and that some sort of bipolar disorder diagnosis better suit their presentation. Treatment. So we know about basic treatment. Bipolar disorder is a very genetic disorder. It is so crucial for people with bipolar disorder to take psychiatric medication, especially to manage the mania. This is controversial. Not everyone wants to take medication. I by no means am a licensed psychiatrist. I am not forcing that on you. I'm just saying that when it comes to this disorder, there are ways to manage the mania, but it is very overpowering and difficult to do without the assistance of medication. If you choose not to take medication or you don't have access to medication, do not feel bad about it. There are plenty of other things you can do. I just hope that changes for you one day if you're open to trying it. People with bipolar disorder can benefit from certain depression treatments since they experience depressive episodes. Therefore, CBT might be helpful, which stands for cognitive behavioral therapy, because it's going to address the unhelpful thoughts these individuals experience, the intense emotions that go with them, especially in mania. We have irritability, anxiety, whatever it may be, the behaviors, because especially for people with bipolar disorder, they have some of these impulsive, reckless behaviors, whether it's sex, spending, reckless driving. These can be addressed in counseling. So that is the other piece. There's medication, but there's also counseling. Therapy is so crucial for any mental disorder, and I absolutely agree that this is the case for bipolar disorder, and you should especially have a treatment team managing your symptoms, especially if you have bipolar 1 disorder or any sort of psychotic features, because you could end up hospitalized, and it's really important that people are monitoring you to care for your safety. There is one form of therapy that treats mood disorders that has been shown to be an evidence-based treatment in treating the symptoms of bipolar disorder, because it helps the individual to get a hold of their routine and notice their sleeping, eating, and social patterns, to become more self-aware of when they may be at risk of slipping into a manic or a depressive episode. This form of therapy is called social rhythm therapy, and I am planning to make a video on this and to go into more detail. But social rhythms are defined as a pattern of habitual daily behaviors that could impact the timing of the circadian rhythm through light exposure. The point of social rhythm therapy is to change the client's behavioral patterns, obviously those being behaviors that are not useful to them and are further perpetuating their mental health symptoms. Some aspects of social rhythm therapy include behavioral activation as well as activity scheduling. This is something that can benefit pretty much anyone. Scheduling your day, there are some aspects to put in your day. These are pleasure, mastery, as well as social engagement. So mastery is exactly what it sounds like. It might be reading, studying for a test, watching a YouTube video to learn something new. Pleasure is listening to music, whatever you enjoy doing, petting your cat. The social engagement piece is so important, especially for people with bipolar disorder, because they need that support and they should not be isolated, because this obviously can worsen their symptoms over time, and we don't want that. Group or family therapy can also be really helpful for individuals with bipolar disorder. I would argue this is the case for most mental disorders, but if someone with bipolar disorder is living with other people, it's important for them to receive the same psychoeducation, meaning education on this mental illness, its symptoms, the treatment options, and how to support someone through it, while also setting boundaries and taking care of yourself. It's important that everyone who lives with this individual is on the same page as the individual on how they can support them through the disorder and be aware of the warning signs when a manic or depressive episode may arise. That's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching. Please leave a like if you've been enjoying this Let's Get Clinical series thus far. I'd love for you to subscribe to my channel as well. Please leave a comment as long as it comes from a kind place. Do you have bipolar disorder? Does a loved one have bipolar disorder? Did you already know this information? And would you like me to do more videos on bipolar disorder? Please let me know down below, and I'll catch you on the flip side. Bye guys.